heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Live from New York and San Francisco, this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Intel gets to work, striking a chip-making deal with Amazon after postponing expansion plans in Germany.
Plus, Elon Musk expanding his support for Republicans, donating millions to back the GOP in congressional races.
And Microsoft rewards its shareholders, boosting its dividend and unveiling a $60 billion buyback plan. That as we hear from co-founder Bill Gates as he tackles a different $3 trillion problem. But first, let's check in on these markets because the S&P 500 hits new intraday highs. We are still well off the highs on the Nasdaq 100, about 5% off of them. But we managed to push on higher on the day. We're up 5%. We're seeing a Goldilocks reading once again when it comes to economic data. Those retail sales surprising to the upside for August, but still the market waits for tomorrow, the Fed, and whether we get a 50 basis point cut. But Ed, you're watching the micro.
Yeah, three big technology names moving higher. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy has told staff they have to go back to the office 5 days a week starting in January, except for extenuating circumstances. Everyone's talking about that. Microsoft boosting its dividend 10%, a new $60 billion share buyback plan that is pushing the stock higher. And then Intel, a long list of news and announcements that shows Pat Gelsinger's turnaround plan is making. They will manufacture a chip for Amazon AWS. They will separate out the foundry business to serve customers. They will pull back in plants in Europe. That's a long list, Caro.
It is, and we get into it with Bloomberg's Ian King. There is the positive, the deal to fabricate for Amazon. How important is this, Ian?
I mean, they needed a win. They needed a big name customer to come out and say, hey, yeah, we can use our stuff. How material this particular type of chip is, how big a deal this individually is another question. And really, I spoke to Pat ahead of the announcement, and he said, look, I don't need one big customer. I need lots of customers. So really, that's the perspective for that particular announcement.
But this is an important start. We'll show what Pat told you on that phone call on screen in a second. It's a fabric chip. What is a fabric chip? And why is it significant that Intel's been chosen to make it?
Yeah, I mean, this is an integral part of a data center. It links other chips together. It's not the kind of thing that you have millions and millions of, but it's very important, and you want it to be made on the best possible technology. The fact that Amazon, which is one of the, if not the leading data center operator in the world, has decided to use Intel, that's an affirmation that Intel has something that it can use and you know, helps.
It helps. You mentioned that he needs lots and lots of customers, but they're not going to be Europe-based for the time being. How upsetting is this ultimately for Germany and Poland today?
Well, he might have customers in Europe, but they won't be building chips in Germany. Remember, they have a plant in Ireland, which they said is going to be the center of their operations for now in Europe. In terms of what this means for the actual, you know, the European investment in semiconductors, it's clearly a setback. Everybody has been hoping that Intel would kind of ride to the rescue, obviously here in the United States, but also Europe is pushing this as a public policy. Anything that delays that, anything that raises the possibility that it won't happen is obviously not good.
Ian, let me show you this chart on the Bloomberg terminal. It shows us that going back to 2020, Intel's only had 3 quarters where sales have grown. What did you learn on your phone call with Pat Gelsinger that suggests this list of actions will change that chart and that at the top line they will start to see some growth?
Right, well, what I said to him was like, Pat, do you have enough money to keep this thing going, right? You know, everybody approves of the plan, everybody approves of what you've set out to do, but they are worried that you don't have enough money to do that. And his answer was, well, this has kind of saved me some more money to help me to keep things going. I feel like I've got the worst of the investment period behind me, and now we're in a position with our technology and what we can offer to begin to start to bring in those orders that turn things around.
Ian King, Always bringing us the important conversations. Thank you. Now let's bring in Jordan Klein to continue that conversation. Tech, media and telecom analyst over at Mizuho Americas. Your take on all of this, Jordan, you write your note this morning really actually highlighting the painful reality for Intel is that in 1 week alone, a company such as Broadcom will add twice the market capitalization of an Intel. How are you thinking about the news coming from what was the key chip manufacturer of 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I mean, I would agree with Ian's summation that this is an important bit of positive news. Intel needed something to kind of help the stock and sentiment. So I think on one side, it's at least a affirmation that, yes, they have this foundry business. They've won an important cloud customer in Amazon. But basically, it's not, we don't really know enough on the volume and the timing of when it would actually drive, revenues for them. And I think now the stage is set for them to hopefully go out and start adding more customers to the mix, whether that's, the biggest and the best would be NVIDIA, but they could get others as well. And that's going to be a very steep hill to climb, but they got to start somewhere, and that's what today was.
Biggest and the best, NVIDIA. Are investors still feeling that that's where they should be allocating, that chips more broadly, chip making is where they should be putting money in this time in the market?
Well, that's a really good question. I think people are a bit mixed on how much more exposure to semiconductors they want and need at this time. The group, semiconductors that is extremely sentiment driven. So when it's performing well, it's got the momentum, people are generally very happy to ride the wave. And that's what you saw all first half of 2024. It was like a fear of missing out, led by NVIDIA. As soon as we hit the highs in the first part of July and the group sold off, I think investor sentiment shifted. People were worried this group is ahead of fundamentals. The valuations were stretched, and it was time to look outside of semis to areas like software or large cap internet. And that's kind of where we are now. I would say last thing is that the investor feedback in semis is quite mixed. Even though the group is still up a lot this year and the stocks act relatively well, not a lot of them are making new highs, and the fundamentals, meaning what these companies are saying, particularly outside of NVIDIA and GPUs for AI, is actually not improving. So in some instances, it's deteriorating a bit, like the auto and memory sector.
Away from the idiosyncratic, Jordan, what did the Intel story tell you about this investment cycle? And through Pat's lens, those potential customers and where they may be going?
Well, it tells me a couple things. It tells me that, one, these large cloud hyperscale customers like Amazon, Meta, Google, Facebook, these large cloud customers are very interested in building and designing their own custom chips. As you pointed out earlier in the show, this is more of a fabric networking chip. But keep in mind, Amazon is very big at building and designing their own chips for training and inferencing, as opposed to relying too much on NVIDIA. So I think that's going to continue. All these big cloud companies with large CapEx, spending budgets will seek to do as much as they can internally with the help of other leading design companies like Broadcom, Marvell, maybe Intel, and others. It also shows that there's really no end in sight here. I think that they're going to look to diversify if they can beyond just building all these chips with Taiwan Semi, who's the world's leading foundry, but they don't want to be too reliant upon them or give TSM so much leverage that they can keep raising prices. So they kind of want to keep the industry balanced and honest, so to speak. And that would be at Intel's advantage if they can show and prove they can execute at these very advanced leading edge nodes.
Jordan, I don't know what you're doing on Wednesday afternoon, but here we'll be focusing on the next FOMC decision. You're somebody whose desk is just every day flowing with technology news, essentially. So how do you and all the people that phone you at 5 a.m. think about the Fed tomorrow?
Well, I think half of them, like myself, just want it to be behind us so we can move on and focus more on fundamentals as opposed to the Fed and the macro. I tend to think this one, is one of the more important Fed decisions and announcements that we've had in some time. But it also feels like a little bit overhyped in terms of, is the market really going to change dramatically, whether it's 25 or 50 basis points? Are institutional investors and big mutual fund managers going to dramatically change the makeup of their portfolio based on 25 versus 50? I don't think so. I think they're already of the view that whether it's 25 or 50, the Fed is going to continue to probably err on the side of wanting to ease as opposed to keep rates high. And with that backdrop, as long as we can believe in a soft landing, which I think most investors do, they're going to probably stay long equities, and they're probably going to continue to look for growth, and that's going to favor key parts of tech. So bottom line, I think when the dust settles in a week, the fundamentals and the backdrop for tech still remain pretty favorable.
Does it still favor the most valuable companies? I think of Microsoft today, once again handing money back in terms of buybacks promised, dividends given, but it's so valuable already. Does sentiment stick with it?
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that there's no deterioration or weakening in positive sentiment for these Mag 7, particularly these names like Microsoft, NVIDIA, Amazon, and Meta, the companies that are perceived to be the leaders in both cloud and AI. Even Apple, I mean, it's down a bit the last few days, but to be honest, like if AI on the smartphone is going to work, they're going to be leading the charge. And I just don't think you can get that exposure, that potential growth in other areas of tech, and actually probably not in other areas of the market. The debate's going to be, what do you pay for it? And that's hard to determine. It's more of an art form than a science. But as long as rates are coming down and the economy's not grinding to a halt, I tend to think people will pay up for growth, and that favors these large mega caps as opposed to the smaller companies that are going to have to see if the economy holds up or not.
Mizuho Americas analyst Jordan Klein, thank you very much. So coming up on the show, we have all the details on Uber's latest driver safety push. That's next. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Starting tomorrow, Uber will begin automatically verifying passengers, checking their account information against third-party identity databases, all in an effort to make drivers feel safer. Bloomberg's Dana Wallman joins us for more. A big step, one that's been called for?
Yes, and I don't think we talk enough about driver safety, which is odd because when you think about it, these are drivers who are picking up strangers mostly in their own cars, and I can imagine that being a somewhat scary, maybe vulnerable feeling. And these are measures being taken really to make drivers feel a little safer as they pick up drivers in the day-to-day.
Dana, how's this going to work? In some cases, like if you pay with a gift card on Uber, rather than attach a credit card, there is some verification as a passenger or rider you already have to go through. What will be required of us going forward?
Yeah, so drivers, and riders who use anonymous payment methods, and I don't know how many of them there are, will need to go through a manual process. But for most of us, the process will be automatic. And it might even be that it's already been done. I actually checked my Uber account before joining you all here on TV, and I had check marks next to both my cell phone number and my email address in my account. So for many customers, that automatic process may have already taken place. And it's worth noting that you cannot, as a rider, opt out of the automatic process. So if you have a phone number attached, the email address, Uber is going to match you against a third-party database to verify your identity. And it may already have been done.
This is one of a couple of steps. They're doing dash cams as well. All of this costs, but the reward must be more sustainable drivers on their platform.
Yes, drivers have said in the past they are worried about their safety, both physically and reputationally. They're worried about things like carjackings, but aside from violent incidents, they're worried about malicious reports, just reports from maybe spiteful riders that could really tank their rating and therefore their standing with the platform and, by extension, their income. So one of the measures today, in addition to the automatic identity verification, is the ability to no longer match with in the future someone who you've rated as a driver a 2 or a 3. As it is, you wouldn't be matched again with someone who you rated just 1 out of 5. But this is sort of an extension of that, saying, okay, this passenger was a bit of a jerk. I rated them a 2 or a 3. I'm not going to see them again.
Bloomberg's Dana Wallman, thank you Very much. Now, Microsoft raised its quarterly dividend 10% and unveiled a new $60 billion stock buyback program, matching the size of the repurchase plan 3 years ago. The company said shareholders, as of November 21st, will receive a quarterly dividend of 83 cents a share, compared with the current 75 cents. The buyback agreement represents less than 2% of Microsoft's market value. Caro.
Let's just discuss, Ed, one of Microsoft's co-founders, Bill Gates, as his foundation just released its Goalkeepers report for 2024, highlighting a sudden halt in the global health boom, with a worsening child nutrition crisis causing a potential $3 trillion in economic losses. I sat down with Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates to discuss just this, how technology and AI can help and why resources are needed. Take a listen.
We do need to raise money to get resources for this so that the poor countries, get out of the poverty trap and then are self-sufficient. The innovation is going to accelerate. Tools like AI are helping us understand the gut, the immune system, how to design vaccines in a very deep way. And the key thing that the foundation has with innovation is making sure it's not just helping the rich countries, but it's helping the poorest. And so, can they get medical advice in their native language on their cell phone? Can they have the diseases that are so ignored, like malaria? Can we use AI to develop ways to not only reduce that, but eventually eradicate it? And so, that's where the foundation is, looking at the innovation and making sure that it's benefiting those most in need.
The foundation talking with global leaders often, I'm sure, global leaders of wealthy developed nations who are preoccupied right now with their own political instabilities, their own worries about the cost of living. Will you get the help you need from developed nations, do you think?
No, that's a very good question. The dream is that even in the face of huge budgetary challenges that all countries have, that they would be willing to have 1% to 2% that go to help the poorest, to help these countries move forward. And these are things where you're saving a life for less than $1,000 per life saved. So, very catalytic, very well measured. I wouldn't be putting my money in unless I knew that it was extremely well spent. And so we're trying to keep this on the agenda to continue that miracle that took place where we made so much progress getting rid of childhood death.
Bill Gates there. And often, Ed, to solve what is a $3 trillion economic issue is not rocket science. It's about getting vitamins out to people. It's about more productive cows.
And consistent with the foundation, what Gates is looking for is a technology that is upfront affordable, but can scale. And that's consistent with what he's done, but they're putting a big check in, particularly in nutrition, microbiome, things like that.
Time now for Talking Tech, and first up, Hong Kong. Well, it's preparing to issue a policy statement on the use of AI in finance, according to sources, with the document broadly intended to signal Hong Kong's support for artificial intelligence. And the move could catalyze the use of the technology in areas from trading to investment banking and cryptocurrencies. Plus, Lenovo started building AI servers in the south of India, moving beyond products such as laptops and smartphones. And the Chinese company will also build out its facilities in Bangalore region, including a research lab with a focus on AI. And Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, well, he's moving to streamline the company. In a memo to employees yesterday, the CEO announced cutting management layers and ordered employees to return to the office 5 days a week, beginning in January. Ed.
More tech news as Salesforce is kicking off its Dreamforce event today. It's also unveiling a pivot in its AI strategy, now saying that its AI tools can handle tasks without human supervision and changing the way it charges for software. Let's bring in Bloomberg Intelligence analyst Anurag Rana. And on the charging, they're going to start doing $2 per conversation handled by an AI agent, as opposed to a subscription on a per head basis. What's the BI reaction to that?
Yeah, so when you look at the way some of these co-pilots are being priced, companies like Microsoft are saying they're going to charge $30 per user per month. So that's one pricing mechanism. Another pricing mechanism is consumption-based, which is what you just mentioned. Adobe has a similar one for their Firefly application, where you're going to get some credits initially and then you're going to have to pay for it. And the third one would be just part of the full enterprise package. So there are several ways you're going to monetize this. But needless to say, over the next few years, we think these costs are going to reduce dramatically, because currently the reason why it's a little bit more expensive is because you require a lot of resources to train these large language models, and over time that processing is going to improve.
So as it becomes cheaper, will that be reflected in the price point that you and I charged for any conversation?
Yeah, I think that's going to be beyond for everything, not just this, but probably, you could say ChatGPT pricing or subscriptions. Over time, you could expect some compression in those charges and, better profit for these AI vendors. But for Salesforce, I think they're going to play it a few ways. They have a product called Data Cloud. I think that's doing very well. That's an area of strength for them. Now, remember, but that's too small of a thing that cannot offset the bigger compression on enterprise IT budgets that's compressing their seat growth right now.
Anurag, I'm surprised that you're not here with me in San Francisco for Dreamforce. You know Salesforce well, the research, the podcast. Why aren't you tempted to come out? Is it not a sort of substantive event?
No, it is an important event, but frankly speaking, almost every week there is an event like this, whether it's Oracle World or Workday. I wouldn't get any work done if I was doing that.
He's got to be in the office, like most of the Amazon employees will have to be as well soon. Just very briefly, what is factored into CRM at the moment and Salesforce? Are we seeing, the enthusiasm around the name reflecting the valuation?
Yeah, I think, for CRM, they really need to get back to double-digit growth rate. I mean, I think this is really a big issue for them, because right now, when we looked at bookings data for the last quarter, we're hovering around that 8.5-9% mark, which means next year sales growth is going to be 9%. You can check that on the Bloomberg terminal. In our view, that needs to come to that 10 to 12% number before, you would see investors pile into it. The margin story is done and done with, but now it's a matter of revenue acceleration for them.
Bloomberg intelligence analyst Anurag Rana, thank you. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Let's just talk politics, because Elon Musk is opening his wallet wider in support of Republican candidates in battleground districts across the country. Now, the Tesla CEO's Super Political Action Committee is funneling $2.1 million in its first foray into congressional races. Bloomberg's Mike Shepard joins us now. This is a new foray. Which kind of races are they targeting?
Well, what they're looking for is some of the most closely contested districts in the country. These are the kinds of competitions that could decide control of the House of Representatives come November. These are areas where Joe Biden won in 2020, but Democrats in 2022 during the midterm elections lost those seats. Now the Democratic Party is trying to make some efforts to regain control of those districts so that maybe they could flip the House back into their hands come November. Now, this will not be an easy task, but it is something that's a little bit more within reach than might appear, even as we look at a very closely contested presidential race. So Elon Musk putting some money through his super PAC into these races. One is Mike Lawler in Westchester. Another is Marcus Molinaro's district further upstate in New York. These are the kinds of places where Republicans are looking to hold on to their gains from 2022.
To some, $2.1 million might not seem like a lot. To others, it will seem like a lot. But the point that Bloomberg's Dana Hole makes well in her story is that Elon Musk is the world's richest man, but also has other platforms in which his voice gets out to voters. Explain why that's important, Mike.
Well, Ed, you're getting at something really important here in this particular campaign, and that is the dynamic of in-kind support that Elon Musk is able to provide to his allies on the right. He, for the first time, really came out and endorsed a candidate when he did so in July, coming out in favor of former President Donald Trump. And he has signaled his interest in pushing more of these right-leaning causes and conservative candidates. So he is doing so using his X platform by amplifying some of their posts and their views, and also putting information out there and putting posts out there that make Kamala Harris and Democrats look not so great.
Mike, what does it mean for his businesses, though, like Tesla? What does it mean to have, financed some political candidates?
Well, it's a really good question, Caroline, because Elon Musk has so much business tied up with the federal government, either directly, for example, with SpaceX, providing so many services to the U.S. government, but also Tesla does have a stake in the fate of how President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and all of its green incentives to get more people to buy electric vehicles, how that goes. So he has a very strong tie to the U.S. government and how things look for his companies. Now, in this sense, he is trying to ensure that not only does he get a candidate like Donald Trump, who is in his court and in his favor, into the White House, he also wants to make sure he has allies in Congress who will act on his interests.
Bloomberg's Mike Shepard out of DC. Thank you very much. Let's get to another story. Instagram is rolling out new privacy settings for teens. It will make teen accounts private by default, limiting the use of private messages and sensitive posts. These restrictive settings will be turned on automatically for all Instagram users under the age of 18. Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner covers social media and joins us now. And you spoke to Adam Mosseri, the chief over at Instagram, not just about how that will look if you're a teen user of Instagram, but the rationale for doing it. What did he tell you?
Well, he said that this has been in the works for over a year, and you can see why, right? This is one of the biggest complaints that Instagram gets from parents. It's one of the biggest complaints they certainly get from lawmakers. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg have to show up in D.C. to answer questions about their role in protecting children on several instances over the last couple of years. So this is something that is not a new problem or something that is not a new idea to them. It's been in the works a long time. I think, the bigger question might be what took them so long, but I think they've gotten to a point here where this is a very robust set of changes, and they feel like they're finally sort of addressing a lot of those concerns that they are getting from parents and lawmakers.
And Kurt, it does intertwine artificial intelligence to help them ensure that you are the age you say you are.
Yeah, it's sort of unique. So if you are a teen under 18 and you're, lying about your birthday, they're going to use AI to try and detect those lies, right? They're going to look at what a normal teen account might look like, what normal teen behavior might look like, and using AI, they will sort of bucket people into whether or not they think they are an under 18 account, and then will automatically put them into those settings, right? Now, it may make mistakes at times, but you can imagine a lot of teenagers who are suddenly going to wake up, hear this news, and try and change their birthday to get around this, and Meta says that they're trying to proactively prevent that.
For many social media platforms, Kurt, the demographic of the user base is important. Do we have a sense of, on Instagram, how much of the user base is teenage and how much of it is parent overseeing teenage user accounts?
Yeah. No, we don't. I mean, we know it's in the millions. We know there are millions of teens around the world and millions of teens just here in the U.S. that are using Instagram. We don't know a more striking percentage than that. This will be a small portion of the overall user base, right? So even though it's all teens under 18, it's really just teens under 16 who need parental permission to change these things. If you are a 16 or 17-year-old, you'll be kicked into these new settings, but you can change them on your own. So, this is a small cohort of users based on Instagram's total audience, but of course it is the most vulnerable, and it's also the group that people are most concerned about, right? Because they're interacting at times with people that they've never met or don't know in real life.
And as a global concern, how is this a global outreach?
Yeah, so this will be implemented for teenagers across the world. They're starting with some English-speaking countries, the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. They're going to bring it to the rest of the European Union, I believe, by the end of this year. And then early in 2025, they'll start expanding this to teens in other countries. So this isn't just a US thing. This is a global thing. And I asked Adam Mosseri, hey, is this the kind of thing that's going to come to Facebook too, right? Because this isn't just an issue on Instagram. He said they want to start small with Instagram, and if all goes well with the rollout, I got the sense that it was very likely these types of protections could move to some of Meta's other apps in the future as well.
Kurt Wagner, thank you. Keeping us up to speed, and more on Meta now, because it's banning Russian media outlet RT and its parent entity, Rossiya Zagodnya, the media group, and other related entities, according to reports. Now, a spokesperson at Meta said in a statement that the outlets have been banned from Meta's apps globally for foreign interference activity. Ed.
Let's take a quick look at markets, Caro, because I don't think we really have done as much so far as maybe we should. The S&P 500, by the way, is very near a fresh record, but I'm looking at the tech-focused indexes. We know what the points boosts are, right? You see one on the screen there, Microsoft, after the share buyback and dividend, that is helping push the NASDAQ 100 higher, along with Amazon. Chips having a better day, outperforming up almost a percentage point on the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. Why? You know the story, Intel, and Intel's seen its gains accelerate. We have so much more to come here on Bloomberg Technology. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Time now for our VC roundup. NVIDIA-backed Sakana AI, now valued at $1.5 billion. This according to sources. The startup, founded by former Google researchers in 2023, was boosted by investments from some of Japan's biggest banks and companies, raising $214 million in a Series A funding round. Meanwhile, Germany's rapid delivery startup Flink has raised $150 million in a new round of funding, boosting its valuation to nearly $1 billion. Still, that's down from $3 billion that it was valued at during the height of COVID, when it emerged as a pandemic darling during lockdowns. And VC firm Patron raised $100 million for a new fund with a focus on young consumer-facing companies, particularly in the gaming field. Its second fund for Patron. Ed, we got more.
Yeah, and Patron general partner and co-founder Jason Ye joins us now for today's VC Spotlight here in San Francisco. Cover gaming a lot in this program. There are lots of headlines we should get to, but I think there's a good place to start when you have $100 million to invest. Where do you find disruption in the gaming industry? It won't be all of your focus, but it'll be a big part.
Yeah, well, good morning, Ed. Thanks again for having me here. And alongside my partners, Brian Cho and Emma Atherton, we're excited to be announcing our $100 million second fund today. So to the point about where we focus, I think a lot of our insight comes from the time that we spent helping to build Riot and Discord. And there's this entire generation of young people that are growing up on these gaming platforms, spending thousands of hours with their friends. And I think we really want to follow the audience and take a look at what are the ways that they're going to evolve how they use the internet.
When I think about the studios in particular, I mean, you still are focused on studios in part. That's an area where there are some uncertain futures, and a lot of them are pulling back, reducing staff. Does that impact your ability to invest anywhere?
I think something we think a lot when looking at gaming studios is this idea of market expansion and market creation. It's incredibly tough to go directly compete against a Riot, an Epic, a Valve. And so I think in that particular area, we really look for like, what is the unique insight? How can you actually grow what previously seemed like a market that might have been too niche? I think League certainly was that way with Dota initially, and then really go from there.
Jason, how much is AI changing the game for you?
I think, as with a lot of technologies, emergent technologies previously, gaming has served as the forefront for new technology adoption. And on our side, we really believe that AI is going to change how people use the internet overall. And I think a lot of the earliest efforts are tied to content and game creation. I think the thing that we're more interested in is like, how can AI actually help to make your experience as a consumer better? How can it make the games you play more fun? How can it make the learning apps more effective? How can you make shopping more easy? So those are the areas that we're looking at.
And that's been a story you've told to institutional investors who've got in on this fund, some big names who manage their own VCs. You've got Mark Andreessen, you've got Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures. Why are they seeking you out in particular, and how easy was it to get that commitment in this environment?
Well, I think fundraising overall, as we've all seen, has been pretty challenging over the last year and a half. I think one thing which resonated with a lot of our earliest investors, including a handful of the general partners you mentioned and some of our largest institutions, is this idea that we're very focused on what we know best. And we spent better part of the last decade helping to build companies like Riot and Discord, and it is becoming increasingly clear that the consumers that grow up on products like Roblox and Discord and League, they're the ones that are going to drive kind of future innovation and adoption of technology. And so that focus has allowed us to really differentiate from a lot of our peers.
Discord's present is very different to its origin story.
Sure.
I wonder how much in that context you'll focus on being an operator and not just an investor. A lot of people have great ideas that then morph into something completely different.
Certainly. I think for our firm specifically, so Amber really helped Discord expand into non-gaming verticals. My job at Riot was to help us launch the game, launch sports, launch entertainment into new markets. And so having this real recent experience helping to launch products, build communities has really resonated with the founders that we're working with.
Jason, I go back to a different hype cycle when we thought of gaming, we thought of Discord, and we thought of Web3. How much is that still an underlying driver for you, even if it's less sexy to talk about?
I think we're always going to look at how new technologies influence how people connect with each other and play online. And so whether it was Web3 initially, whether it's generative AI now, I don't think that changes. Again, I think as a firm, we're much more focused on the audience and the behavior of that audience. And I do think it is good to be looking in areas where not everyone else is looking. And so we are always going to be hyper-focused on this audience as they kind of grow up and adopt new technologies.
Jason Yeh of Patron, thank you so much for joining us on The New Fund.
I want to get a quick check-in on crypto markets. Not really talked about it as much. Just before 10 a.m. Eastern, a lot of risk assets took a big leg to the upside, and that included Bitcoin, that's now back trading around 61,000 US dollars per token. It had sort of had a shaky start to the week, which is a Fed week, and that was a big part of the narrative. There are some other individual movers as well, largely tied to news, crypto-adjacent stocks, MicroStrategy, Riot, and Coinbase all pushing higher as well. Some news overnight, Donald Trump headlined an event billed as the unveiling of a crypto platform promoted by the Republican nominee and his sons called World Liberty Financial. It's all part of his push to attract digital asset proponents. Here's what Trump had to say about why he thinks the US should embrace crypto.
If we don't do it, China's going to do it. China's doing it anyway. Yeah. But if we don't do it, we're not going to be the biggest, and we have to be the biggest and the best.
We're joined now by Insight Consulting Principal Amanda Wick. She used to work at the Justice Department, specializing in money laundering and crypto. And I think all those that tuned into the spaces would agree it was kind of thin on detail and specifics. A focus on DeFi. There'll be the issuance of a token, but it will be for accredited investors only, here in the United States at least. What did you learn? What's the main takeaway here, Amanda?
Well, I think the sad thing is that everything he just said is right. I think what people in the industry are terrified is that he's the emissary saying it, because there's no doubt that WLFI is going to be, if not a pump and dump, a rug pull. Everybody's watching in horror. Even Trump supporters are begging him not to do this because of the negative impact it could have on the industry long term.
Amanda, can you give us real data or hard evidence, as someone who formerly worked for the government in this, as to why you think it's indefinitely going to be a rug pull or a pump and dump? Because many working on the project, I would think, would dispute that.
Yeah, and I really try to be objective, but if you're looking at a project where the incentives are flipped, usually these projects, the organizers hold 20%, maybe less of the tokens. I think Ethereum kept maybe 16%, Cardano was 20%. The Trump organizers are keeping 70%, and even in the 30% that will be released to the public, they're going to make some profit off of that. That is a terrible sign in terms of how it's being structured. The other thing you have to look at is the motive of the people organizing it. Trump's staring down the barrel of a $400 million collection in New York, and this would be personal funds that he could use to satisfy that. So the motives that they have here to make a bunch of money very quickly is unfortunately the worst aspect of crypto, and it's the part of the industry that people do not want to continue.
Amanda, Bloomberg states quite clearly in its report that the issuance of WLFI is in sort of having a role in the governance of the business itself. I want to park that. The other narrative is that Trump thinks the United States of America needs to do this bigger approach because China's already doing it, and he wants America to be a leader in the field. How do you respond to that rationale?
He's absolutely right. I wish that the Harris campaign was saying that. I think they're a little tied in terms of what they can say because a sitting vice president can't really talk about the sitting administration negatively. But everybody in the industry wants a pivot from the Dems, wants America to lead first. The sad thing is Trump is right. I think the sadder thing is this project might end up destroying the very thing that he said that was accurate.
When we think of China, though, we don't see China embracing all of crypto and projects. We think perhaps more of them entertaining the idea of stable coins or indeed some sort of form of using within central bank coin. What of DeFi more broadly, Amanda, and this project about sort of getting in the way of the intermediaries? And it's all about loaning, lending, assets.
Yeah, look, there are great aspects of DeFi, and I think that part of his project is the good part that the industry wants to talk about. Again, it's just that the emissary, if this ends up being a rug pull or a pump and dump, it's the worst part of DeFi. But there are amazing DeFi projects out there that the industry wants to highlight and showcase. This will not be one of them. And I don't know that China is necessarily the market that's leading on DeFi. There are other countries that I think are more pro-investing and are pro-regulating in those areas, areas like UAE, Singapore. Sometimes he doesn't get it quite right, which is unfortunate. But the fact that America needs to lead in DeFi is correct. It is horrifying that this project may take us back 10 years instead of advancing us the way that the industry would hope.
Zeke Fox reported an amazing long deep dive story on the people behind this project, and Doe, a project before that had been hacked, and people who've come across from that. They had responded saying, basically an email address that he posted to saying, we all see the picture you're trying to paint here and consider it at best grossly inaccurate. And they're saying they're confident of our results will speak for themselves. You talk of regulation, Amanda. What regulation could be put in place to ensure that projects being built like this don't have this question of whether it'll be a rug pull?
Well, look, I mean, there are regulations that we could use in TradFi. I prosecuted countless people who stole money as asset managers in TradFi. So it's not a perfect system now. And a lot of times you're just relying on doing your own due diligence, or as we say in crypto, DYOR, do your own research. I think there are particular regulations in DeFi because it's making certain financial acts decentralized. It's a longer, complicated question.
Amanda Wick, Insight Consulting Principal. We'll get you on for the longer, more complicated answer soon, we hope. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology, Ed.
Check out the pod. You know where to find it online, on the Bloomberg platforms from New York and SF. This is Bloomberg Technology.